I wonder if
Anticipation.
this does auto refresh. I'm just gonna keep hitting refresh until something shows up.
Never refresh. That's a rookie mistake. That's how you lose out on the 100 Thieves apparel drop, buddy.
That's
Don't
true.
refresh.
Never refresh.
Never refresh. How are we looking? We good?
Yeah, it's good.
Look at that, everybody. It's 2019 and our technology still works.
Wow, it didn't break yet.
It didn't break yet.
We're like seconds in and it's still going.
This is a record-breaking year for us. Who knows? There might not even be echo in the microphone this time.
Yeah, and I can confirm Twitch also works.
Wow.
So we're 2 for 2.
Look at that. We are starting off this year on the best of feet. So welcome, everyone, to 100 Talk. This is the show about that team that we all love, 100 Thieves. Specifically, the magical LCS squad that has been assembled to take on the 2019 season. Jordan, on a scale of 0 to, say, Kevin Garnett, anything possible after the championship, how excited are you for the upcoming season?
100 Thieves excited.
100 Thieves excited.
I was hoping you were going to give me a numerical scale, but I had to try to work that one in there.
I like a more abstract scale, personally.
Yeah. 0 to Kevin Garnett. We're at full Kevin Garnett, baby.
Yes, good. Wouldn't have it any other way. Well, so the season is just a little under 2 weeks away, which is insane.
Yeah. I mean, the offseason is truly dragged. But 2 weeks, that'll go quick. It's less than 2 weeks. I think at this point is 126.
Yeah, it's less than two weeks. So I'll put an asterisk by it dragged because it dragged once we hit November 22nd and we got the news that Bang was going to be on the team. From that point on, it has dragged.
Right.
Because
like Christmas Day came and went, and I was like, "Come on, Christmas, get out of here! What are you doing?"
Yeah. Well, we have
Slowing me down.
We have more reason to be excited for this particular show, and why is that, Jordan?
Well, we got a special guest.
A special guest. Again, starting off the year right. And who's that very special guest? Can you introduce him?
Yes, it's one Mr. Joseph Jang. Please welcome Joseph to the show. Joseph, thanks for joining us.
Hello. Yay. Insert crowd noise, all of that good stuff.
Don't need to insert. It's right here.
Well, I mean, like a large crowd, a crowd of more than two.
A stadium.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome. So this is Joseph Jang, the strategic coordinator and head analyst for 100 Thieves. How are you doing, Joseph?
Really good. I'm just really excited to kind of talk about, everything that I do on this show. And the enthusiasm from like you and Jordan is like gonna make this super easy for me.
There we go. I like to hear it, man. This guy is chomping at the bit.
If there's one thing we bring every week, it's enthusiasm. I think even in like the tough weeks, we've had some rough Worlds matches weeks. Got to stay hyped. There's just so much to be excited for. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Well, we are very excited to have you, and we thank you at the top of the show just for spending time during what is surely a busy time for you guys. I mean, you've got a lot of preparations going on right now as the split gets ready to kick off. What's the feeling around there? How's everybody doing?
I think the expectations are a lot higher this year. So
fair enough.
I mean, out of the 4 like kind of new organizations that came into the franchise last year, I think we definitely performed above expectations as an organization. So this year, our investors were definitely more all in. So we definitely want to take home at least a championship, and that we're not going to say it, but like everyone knows it, and we need to like succeed at like near that level. So everyone's kind of gearing up for that.
Man, I think if there are words that ever make a fan excited, those are those words, buddy.
I mean, in most sports, you can't really do a lot more than a championship, and I know that in ours there is more, but that would be pretty good. That would be pretty good. I would be happy with that. And I feel like I don't know if that's a common level of confidence, but as I've been listening to other interviews and stuff as the season kind of gears up, it kind of feels like everybody's a little bit hesitant to say it, but you know that there are people out there who are super hungry, and I think it's good that we are right there with them for sure.
Yeah.
That's how it is. Expectations couldn't be higher, and in year 2, that's kind of a crazy thing, right? Like, a lot of teams would be just getting their sea legs under them, I guess. But, man, this is going to be a good year. Before we get too far into 2019, which we're all excited to do, let's take a step back and focus on the man here, who has, by the way, one of the best Twitter headers you'll ever see. So that's at Jungle Juice LOL. Follow him right now. Look at that Twitter header. That is amazing stuff. Joseph, just tell us like a little bit about how you give us the 3-paragraph version of how you got to your current position under Thieves. So what were you doing before? What experience did you have? What are you doing now that's different than 2018? That sort of thing.
I guess before League of Legends or esports, I was just like a really normal student in college. So I went to the University of Rochester and I was studying mathematics, and I've always been like playing like League of Legends. But once I kind of moved away from home, I was allowed to pursue it a lot more independently, just because I didn't have that pressure from my parents. So I played a lot, and we did pretty well in our collegiate program. That kind of really didn't exist, but we had like collegiate tournaments back then. So that was kind of what piqued my interest in like, hey, how much further can I take this? So I'm sure you guys know who Martin Shkreli is.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is not a name I anticipated hearing on this show.
Yeah. So before that guy went to jail or prison, wherever he is now, he actually had 2 really big investments in the League of Legends space. One was in Europe and one was in NA. So he had like Imagine, that was a Challenger Series team, and I think Team Denial in Europe. So everyone on Europe got scammed, but he treated the North American players very well. And so that was kind of my first experience with esports, and I was like really surprised, because back then the investors weren't like people from Turing Pharmaceuticals or like Goldman Sachs or people that we have today, like Under Thieves, Sequoia. It was like very, very grassroots. So going from there, I realized there was like a lot of capital available. So from then on, I joined another Challenger Series team called Nova, and that's when I kind of worked with this guy named Angelo. He's currently doing things with like cryptocurrency and esports. He was partnered with this guy named Edward Chang. I promise this is going somewhere.
No. This is like fascinating, dude. You roll with this.
Yeah.
So Edward Chang, I think he's currently one of the VPs at EA. He worked with Angelo. So when Edward and Blake Robbins, who you guys all know, when they were applying for a franchise in 2017, they reached out to me in like June to kind of get some feedback on like what to do during the application process, right? Like what are they looking for? How should League of Legends stuff like structure or staff be structured, and just general questions about the space. And that was kind of my first interaction with Blake. So once I found out that Blake's process got accepted, that's when we started talking in depth about like what I would want to contribute, and that's kind of how I became a part of Under Thieves. So it was like a multiple month process, and we definitely started off with like nothing, but we built really fast. I think the analogy everyone uses is like we were on a plane and we were building it while it was flying.
It was launched into orbit and suddenly had to build it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I'm at Under Thieves now. And yeah, it's an incredible journey. There's been really high ups and downs, and I think everyone's story is different, but especially in esports, there isn't like a process. Like I think for most traditional jobs, there's like 4-year degree into like interview processes when you're a junior to an internship, use that internship for like leverage into like a full-time position. But esports it's always been like, how did you get here? There's been no formal structure. So I think that's always a really cool part, right? The people that you work with, they come from all different kinds of backgrounds, and you got kind of different facets of like things that you've never really experienced before. So that's always really cool.
Yeah. This is interesting to hear this story because like I feel like we need to update the classic like 7 degrees of bacon to like this 2 degrees of Blake Robbins. I swear to you, his name comes up in like every conversation about like, oh, how did you get like into esports? Well, Blake Robbins, blah, 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 blah. Man, every time. Yeah. That's insane. That's cool that you guys all have that common thread.
He's a kingmaker.
Yeah, when I first talked to him, I thought this guy was like he's a VC, so I thought he was like in his 30s, and then I'm like, okay, this guy's the same age as me, wildly more successful, like top 30 under Forbes. It's always really awesome, like how hard this guy's working behind the scenes for everyone. So yeah, Blake's awesome.
Are you smiling because you realize how old we are? Is that what you're laughing about? It's like, oh, I thought this guy was in his 30s. Oh shoot!
No.
Oh man. Well, yeah, that's great, man. So now, well, like that took you to 2018, right? You ran the academy program for 100 Thieves.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, was that really your first time out as a coach or what?
So before that, like I said, I did the 2 Challenger Series teams, and I guess the other really big team I've been a part of was an Echo Fox. So Echo Fox was the first team that tried to do like an academy kind of program. Like they had Delta Fox, and they had like their stream team or whatever. Like with I Have a Cutie Pie and Scara. So before that, they had like an actual academy team that they wanted to utilize. So like I was a challenger player myself, so I had like a pretty good idea of like what other challenger players are out there, and I've always thought that like it'd be really cool to try and utilize a second program. So I was like, I thought the best like stepping stone, I guess, when we built this new organization.
Yeah. Okay. Jordan, are you cool diving into the nitty gritty a little bit on? I think we can talk a little bit about your academy experience, ask some academy oriented questions, and then we can move on to more of what you're doing now with the LCS. So, one of the first things that we wanted to hear your perspective on is, you hear people talk about the academy program, and the goal being not like we're going to win every game and be like champions of, the academy league or whatever, but really more to like prepare players to be viable in the LCS. So if that's the goal, like how do you measure the player's success, in working towards that?
Okay. So I guess that's like a common trope that everyone tries to sell. It's not about winning, it's about improving. And I mean, yeah, that's true, but like this space, it is competitive, so it kind of is inherently toxic. It's like when we grow up in school, you have your parents telling you, be the best that you can be, right? But in this industry, you have to be better than other people because you're a competitor. So it is inherently toxic. So with academy and with amateur, even though like winning isn't the end goal, it definitely helps players improve because winning team, that's always going to make things easier. If you're winning, it's easier to get along with your teammates. It's easier to learn things because you're like motivated. You're seeing results of your hard work pay off. And when you don't win as frequently, it's like I'm working really hard, but I'm not getting the results that I want. So that's like a really weird logic gate that a lot of players go through when they're losing. So for academy, winning is definitely like a pretty big part of it. You still have to win games in academy for players to improve, for the most part at least. And I guess the next part is like, are they good enough to either play on the LCS counterpart of the organization they're a part of, or can they play in an LCS team in the next split or next year on another organization, right? Or are they competitive enough to remain in this industry for a while? That's like what kind of like that success is. So I mean, there's multiple ways to find it, but I would say that's like the most fundamental aspect of it.
Yeah.
So would you say that, you kind of have two masters, right? That you have the LCS squad who's looking for the talent that, they're solely focused on how are they going to win the most games this split. And then you have the academy squad where, like you said, there are a couple of different things that they might be thinking about, right? So how do you, they're kind of competing factors then if it's, well, this person's really developing, but we know that that's not going to be part of, the LCS like victory condition, right? Like they're not going to contribute to a more successful LCS squad for us. So how do you kind of balance that, or what's your experience been with kind of, developing players as much as you can, while also realizing, understanding that sometimes it just doesn't match up with the LCS teams, like their needs, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that's always a really big question that organizations ask when they're in the off season, right? What are we planning to do with LCS this year? How much money are we planning on spending? What's our payroll look like? And depending on like what you want to do with your LCS team, that's usually how your academy team factors into that.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at, for example, Team Liquid, they have some of the best players in their respective roles, and they're signed on multiple year deals,
Right.
right? So, when you say you're going to integrate your academy team with your LCS counterpart, that's like a really hard decision for a coach to make because the skill gap between your like LCS player and your academy player is so big
Right.
that just by trying to implement new players, that's going to be really difficult for you to execute. So when Cloud9, I think they did the best job of utilizing
Yeah.
academy last year for sure. When Reaper, bench Jensen and Sneaky, right? That was a really bold move. Like not a lot of coaches have the, tenacity to do that.
I think it set
Um,
Reddit on fire, if I remember correctly.
yeah, and honestly, like they were doing really poorly in the regular season, but they managed to swing everything around. And if things did not turn around, that would have been really, really bad. But I mean, I think part of coaching is just making really hard decisions, and you can't really say things in hindsight. You just have to make the best decisions with the information that you have available. So that's just always going to be a really hard decision. And I just think that the having the option of potentially hedging your LCS players is really powerful for what Academy can be. It's like even if you don't want to go in that direction, just having the option in case things go wrong is really meaningful because with most of the LCS coaches, they want to make things work with their LCS players, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's always like a really delicate balance that I think every organization is gonna have a different approach or philosophy about.
Do you
And then
see? Oh, go ahead, Jordan, please.
I was gonna say one quick follow up to that. I feel like
Mhm.
ever since Cloud9 found success with that strategy,
Mhm.
everybody has said that's what teams have to do is develop a 7-man roster and put people in and out. And just interested for your kind of quick take on that. Like,
Mhm.
how convinced are you that that is needed in this league, or
Mhm.
is it just a strategy that works for some teams and not others? And because you listen to the fans talk, and they're like, if you're not developing an academy roster like Cloud9, you're not going to make it to Worlds.
Mhm. I mean, there is some truth to it, and I guess with the sixth and seventh man roster, the thing is like if you look at the average age of players on Team Liquid and players on a lot of the other NA rosters, we have very much older players,
Mhm.
right? So it's like how long can this be sustainable for? Be because no one really has an answer for that, right? Because there's no like actual hard data or evidence that suggests that players that get older can't compete at a certain point. There's not enough data points yet. So investing in amateur talent is definitely very important, and it's just like considering trade-offs, right? Wins on a short-term basis, like wins this week versus future wins over the course of multiple years.
Mhm.
And I guess that's like a topic that we would need to delve into further because from an organizational standpoint, for at least for coaching staff, wins this year, wins this split always is more important to us, right? And that's why in like traditional sports, you have your head coaches and you have your competitive GMs, where the competitive GMs are looking at like how are we, succeeding this year? How about the next 5 years?
Mhm.
Whereas the head coach is like, how can we get the best results this year? Because that's going to reflect best on them.
Right.
So that's always like the power dynamic that's going on internally when we talk about like academy versus LCS.
Yeah.
So
Makes
You
sense.
mentioned having a pretty big skill gap right between the LCS players and the academy players. Is this
mhm.
something that you see closing over time? And if so, is that like, we're still many years out from those teams or from academy level players being able to hot swap, or what's your take on that?
Oh, actually, I think last year was actually a really big step to closing that gap. Because it's not like these LCS players have like better mechanics than these academy players. Actually, there's a lot of academy players that have better like raw mechanical ability than some of the LCS players, but there's a lot of intangible things that academy players don't know how to do yet. And a lot of that would just be like how to interact like on a team. So a lot of these people don't know how to communicate how they're feeling or how to express like their emotions properly. And they also don't know how to play the game correctly, or I shouldn't say correctly, but the most efficient way we know now. So learning all of that is basically the gap for Academy and LCS. And now that we have like the funding to provide these players with like better facilities, better staff, better structure, it's going to be much more fluid, and it's going to be a lot easier in the future to get these guys on track to become LCS players in the future.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Cole. We had a question that we were going to ask later on, but that kind of reminded me now. Do you mind if I jump ahead in the script a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things that is super interesting to me, Joseph, is the high school and collegiate kind of systems in league right now, and you've got organizations, startups who are trying to build high school teams, right, and a structure for that to develop. And I think that's one of the things that you see the difference being between league and more traditional sports is just like you were talking about, the ability to play within a team and to kind of function within that, to play a role as a member of a team is just not as developed when you play solo queue primarily. So super interested for your take on what role, because right now what I hear about like even the collegiate scene is it doesn't really play a formal role in developing professionals, right? And please correct me if you have a different view on that, but that's kind of what I've heard. So I think one of the ways that you can get a unique experience from high school and college is being a part of a team who plays together and stays together. So interested for your thoughts on how you see those two kind of fitting into this whole professional development piece of the players.
Okay. I guess on that take, I think, well, there's the first really big part that I think gets like skipped a lot. I think it's just like appropriation. So, there's always been this really big stigma against esports, and just having like access to these programs in like high school and college, it's gonna make sure that these like new people that want to enter the space kind of destroy those like negative connotations or current like past media portrayals. And it shows that there are role models, there are opportunities out there if you're passionate about like anything, right? So just like anything else, esports is going to provide you with all these opportunities that if you work extremely hard in, it's going to be available for you. So I think those programs do a really good job creating those communities where people can kind of come together and talk about that. So I think that's always really, really important. And then in terms of playing on a team, for League of Legends, I don't know how I feel about this because as a scout, we scout players, right? We scout like raw talent. So when you play on a team, you kind of tend to your raw talent starts to kind of dwindle. And what I mean by that is when you're playing solo queue, you don't really like. There's no mentor telling you like this is the best way to win. So a lot of people are in high elo solo queue. They like mechanically outplay like certain situations that they shouldn't be able to, and because they're so good in those micro situations, that's how they win their games, right? So that's like their strategy. I need to play this situation better. When you go into competitive, it's not like I should have used a skill shot like 2 micropixels like to the left. It becomes more about like how do you communicate with your teammates. So a lot of the improvements becomes communication driven. So if you play in all these teams in high school and college, I'm kind of curious to see like do these players like mechanical ability dwindle or will they increase? So that's a question I'm asking in the back of my head when I see these programs. But I definitely think they're incredibly healthy just so we can kind of increase the exposure so that we have like a much bigger player base in solo queue and stuff.
That's super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. It's interesting to see kind of the hype that develops around some of these prospects with their mechanical skill, because it's like, oh, like, this dude has just this incredible raw skill that if only we can make that work like on a team, like he's gonna be Faker or whatever,
Yeah.
I feel like you hear that about a lot of players, but it's definitely got to be a big question mark. And there are other things that impact it too. I mean, right, like say one of the players that you had last year, Levi, right? Him not obviously no one would question his ability, right? Like a lot of hype around that signing. Everybody was super excited about it. Not only does he have to like play on a new team in a new context, but he also has to speak a new language. So there's lots of things that go into that. And then on top of that, like with Levi in particular, our take on it is kind of that he wasn't on the LCS team not because he didn't necessarily have the ability to do that, but just situationally with the rest of the team and the import slot situation, it just wasn't really possible to fit him in. So what are your thoughts on that situation? And then we know he's with JD Gaming now. Like, how are you forecasting he's going to do? Any takeaways you have on Levi?
Levi's gonna do great in LPL. So here's kind of like the stylistic, I think, difference and what comes with coaching in like, LPL and like NA. So in NA, it's a very like conservative decision-making approach. It's like, let's not take risks that are unnecessary. Let's try to play off these advantages that are known. And then if you watch LPL games, all these skirmishes, right? Very mechanical, very like much more higher mechanical level play. So Levi was kind of that. He always wanted to play at a really high mechanical level. And so I think when he's playing with his new teammates, like I haven't really seen Yagao, but I know Zoom's pretty good. So I think he'll like mesh really well with his teammates. And I'm like a Lee Sin player myself. So I've always been a really big fan of Levi, and I've been a really big fan of Flawless because he's a really good Lee Sin player as well. So I think he has a lot of like, honestly, like the level of talent at that roster is just going to, be closer to what he like kind of had. Because in academy you're not always gonna have that same level of players. So I think he'll be just like a lot happier to kind of work with those players, and I think he's gonna do great in terms of like being released from 100 Thieves. I think, for our academy program, it's not about, pushing them up just to our LCS, but, where is the best trajectory for this player, right? What's the best career trajectory? And for Levi, it was like, it had to be some kind of LCS position or LPL equivalent, right?
Yeah.
So when all these offers started coming in and Levi had an opportunity to play with this fantastic roster, it was the best decision for him. So that's kind of what happened in the offseason.
Yeah.
And go ahead. Sorry.
No, I don't want to cut you off, but I was just saying, it seemed like in my opinion, a rather benevolent move from the org, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no real incentive to release him into the wild, but other than like for him to, have the best career that he possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, we had obviously our trajectory for what we wanted our LCS roster to look like as well. And there were certain iterations that did include Levi, but ultimately we thought our iteration was gonna help us win the most. So it just kind of worked out for both parties mutually.
Yeah. Okay, well, really quick, let's wrap up talking about Academy with just one more question about some of the other players on the squad from last season. I mean, one of the things that Jordan and I talked about is how we saw Rikara, Brandini, and Levi play on the LCS squad at different points during the season, and the results were like a little bit mixed. There's some good parts, some parts that didn't go as well.
Yeah.
But there's obviously like that whole thing of like, if you're gonna play a player, like, are they ready? What kind of impact is that going to have on them when they actually get into a game situation? In a case like Rikara is like a playoff situation, that might matter a whole lot. So when you guys are making those decisions about like, are we going to do this or not? How do you weigh the trade-offs of experience? Are they ready? With also the expectations that come with starting on an LCS stage.
Right. So from a coaching staff perspective, you always have to consider like, is changing the roster up, how is that going to affect our short-term and long-term success? Right? Is this going to affect how we place in playoffs? Like, is our playoff trajectory going to be hurt by doing this roster change? So usually those questions come first. And if they kind of meet those benchmarks, that's when we can start thinking about, doing these swaps. So I think for any player in esports, a lot of these outcomes or situations where even I'm on 100 Thieves, right? A lot of that was like random encounter.
Yeah, sure,
So
sure.
for these players, they never had like the perfect opportunity to play an LCS. Like for Wild Turtle, it was like double lift, right? With Rikara, it was a situation with Cody. Like everyone's story is going to be different, and you're never going to be set up. You're never going to be fully prepared, right? Sometimes it's going to be a boon from the left, sometimes it's going to be from the right, and you just kind of have to take it. So when do you think these players are ready? I don't think ever, but they just kind of have to take whatever opportunity they could get.
Do
And
you
if,
think
yeah.
do you think over time, as the skill gap closes, we'll see more players who have those opportunities to step up? And, you know, like, I guess my question is, do you think we're going to kind of stumble upon more stars in that way over time, where it's just like, look, he had a chance and he took it and boom? Because I think part of it is, right, like you said, the
Mhm.
skill gap is just, it's, in some cases it's big, and
Yeah.
it's like, well, compared to someday, he's
Mhm.
there's some room there, but
Yeah.
compared against someday, there's room between almost everybody. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think for someday, right? Like the reason he's so good, like it's not like the insane like rhythm mechanics, right? His decision making is like so good. So even on like a mechanical level, it's like I know he's gonna use a skill, and I know how to dodge it. That's like decision making versus like a skill shot from fog of war and dodging it. That's like the
Yeah.
raw mechanical talent I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
if you have that latter part, you can definitely develop this like the decision making that some people like someday have. So I do think that gap will eventually close. How fast it'll close, I can't really give you an answer. Like you basically have to improve at a faster rate than all the current pros are improving at, right? Because like you're constantly playing catch up. So your ceiling has to be a lot higher and your floor is going to be a lot lower. So like how fast is your growth rate? That's always like a question that we're going to ask with academy, right? This player looks like he's a good prospect, but where is he going to be a year from now? No one will know because we don't know about his attitude. We don't know how he'll get along with his teammates, and we don't know how he'll like handle stress in a high stress environment. So all of these factors come into question, and basically it's not about where they are now. It's like where are they going to be in a year. So that's kind of what academy is always going to be about. Um, and hopefully we can get more consistent with our results in producing like LCS level players. And I think that's the goal of what academy is going to be eventually.
Yeah. All right. Well, switching gears a little bit into the upcoming LCS season and
Mhm.
the now of what you're doing.
Yeah.
First off, I mean, this is a question from Twitch chat and a question we want to know too. How are scrims going, man?
Scrims are going great.
Scrims are scrims.
Yeah, scrims are scrims.
Okay. What's that
Uh,
system like? Can you talk about the scrim system? Like, it's so from an outsider's perspective, right? It seems like it's a rather informal thing that the teams kind of arrange between themselves. There's no like,
yeah.
there's no like league sanctioned scrim schedule or whatever.
Mhm.
I don't know what kind of attitudes the teams bring into scrims. Like, are they going to be super experimental, or are they just going to like, all right, let's evaluate this team and play to win? Like, how does it go?
Mhm. So I think every team's approach is different, but let's kind of talk about how it's set up. It's like basically all the coaches and managers of all the organizations were like in this Slack group, and we basically message each other like, "Hey, this is when we're scheduling scrims. Don't schedule scrims past this point." So teams like just scrim each other, and that's what our scrim system's like. I think in traditional sports you have like your like second line, third line, so you practice internally. But like I said, because of the scale gap, practice it internally just doesn't give you the level of practice yet. So that's why a lot of teams practice with each other.
Necessary
Um,
evil, huh?
yeah, it's yeah, and I mean, there's definitely been instances of like leaks and stuff like that that definitely people want to move more internal. But as of yet, this is probably the most efficient system. Um, so in terms of like your outlook for scrims or what you're looking for, I think every team's approach is different. And it's just basically about reading your players. Let's say your like team is a team that's like really tilt proof or not tilt proof, like really tilt prone, right? So
Okay.
if they have a really bad day of scrims, then things are going to get progressively worse, right? Then you're gonna try to find like a team that is kind of similar to your skill level, right? So that practice isn't like it's too easy, but at the same time it's not too hard where your players feel like they're still losing. So I think every team's approach is going to be really different in that regard, in terms of like how experimental should we be. I think some teams are a lot more experimental than others. Like for example, even on stage, Echo Fox was like swapping players around
Yeah. Yeah.
on stage, like not just for funnel, but literally playing like put players in different roles. So I think all of that comes down to just kind of the scrim culture that your organization has and the kind of culture that your coaching staff sets. So I think that's just like different across every single org, but I'm curious to see what that looks like as well.
Do you know if regions scrim exclusively within that region during the season?
Oh, we have to because we
Okay.
all play on like these servers.
Servers,
So
yeah.
yeah, if
Oh,
we
yeah,
wanted to scrim like other teams from other regions, like the ping difference will be
yeah.
really,
forever.
really bad.
You don't want to play LCK teams on like 800 ping?
You could learn so much.
We played LCK teams last year at Worlds at like 0 ping, and even that was difficult. So
Yeah.
on 800 ping, I don't really know what that's gonna look like.
Yeah, yeah.
When I play placements, I feel like I'm playing at 800 ping.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the problem of people that play at our level. So you wouldn't know anything about that. So and let's back up, zoom out a little bit. So can you just talk like about what your day-to-day routine looks like what your duties to the team literally are? Because
Okay.
like strategic coordinator, head analyst, like all right, we kind of get a feel, but what are you actually doing that you can talk about at least?
So I've always I've come from like I said, I used to do actuarial science. That was what I was trying to do. So I've always had a pretty mathy background. And I've always liked strategy. So that's kind of like the trajectory I want to start moving in towards the future. Because with coaching, there's going to be like personality management, making sure that players are expressing their emotions properly with one another, and just like setting the atmosphere. And I think those are all very important like traits that a coach needs. But above all that, like if I were to choose to specialize, I would want to just fully solely focus on the strategic aspects of it. So right now, with the introduction of Ryu into our coaching staff, we're still kind of like dissecting like who like does what. But for me, I want to do a lot of like the scouting for enemy teams. So
I love how you
know,
call them enemy teams.
I do
I
too.
just love that. Your mind is in the
Basically-
right place.
yeah. So when we stack up against this team, like how does our chances of winning go up depending on what this draft looks like? Are there any like specific map movements that these guys do that we should be ready for? Because every team is going to play differently around like more closely around a certain player, or if they get to a certain point in the game, they're going to play a little differently or draft a little differently, right? I want to kind of view things from their perspective, and then kind of take that back, see how we do internally, and kind of like measure those things so that we have like the best prep going into our games. So that's kind of like the direction I'm trying to move into.
Yeah. So then let's bring something up then. True or false? Your life right now is run by Riot's patching schedule. And everything that follows.
I would say yes and no. Yes, because obviously if a patch gets introduced, there's like our players are going to have to adapt to it. But no in the sense that I think players will always have habits. So even though like these new champions are introduced and even those new champions are strong, players are still going to have what their comfort pools are, what their comfort champions or their comfort styles are. So that's why people call it macro, right? Because macro does change if there's like a crazy change in the game, but there's always going to be certain like strategic elements that stays the same, whether or not like the patch changes every like from here and there. So that's like kind of like the things that really don't change, like the fundamentals.
Yeah. But then there's something like gold funneling can happen and just really throw a wrench into stuff, I feel like.
Gold funneling was interesting.
Do you like that they patch so often? I mean, obviously the goal of a patch, right, is to kind of like tune everything, balance, or I should back that up. So the stated goal, right, the theoretical goal is to tune and balance players, make sure the play is competitive, make sure there aren't any abusive strats like inting Scion up top or something like that, right? So, I mean, there's obviously like a good goal, but do you think that it's really accomplished by this patching schedule, or would you prefer to play on like one patch for the whole season?
I mean, I honestly a lot of people in the office call me a suit for this specific reason.
A suit?
Yes.
Okay.
But I completely like see why like Riot does it. Like they balance around like the biggest player base, right? Because that's what's good for the longevity of the game. So, esports in League of Legends is basically about like keeping the engagement levels really high with like the fans. and what's going to keep this game interesting, right? Making it new, making it innovative. So obviously they're going to want to release new patch changes, and they're going to release patch changes revolving around, a majority of the player base. And I completely understand that. I do think from a competitive aspect, it is really hard when they like change things mid-season that are really, really radical. So I think before like the season begins, it's usually fine because players will have enough time to adapt. But when you like release something crazy, like it can really, really screw with like how teams will do. Like you can have a second place team do really well in this meta, and then now it's like a different meta, and now they're suddenly 6th or 7th place. So that's really, really hard.
And we've seen meta changes bench players, so that
Right.
Yeah.
that happens, right? And that's got to be a huge strategic like upheaval for a team when you have one entire player, 1/5 of your squad, sitting on the bench. So
Yeah, I mean, you literally had players refusing to learn mages for AD carries this like last year.
Not naming any names.
Yeah.
Ew.
And it was literally like, and the AD carries would be like, okay, Riot is definitely trolling. They're gonna revert this change, and that's literally what a lot of AD carry players thought. So they refused to adapt, and that's always going to be a question. Like, was that patch real? And when players, when, and when they figured out that it actually was, that's when they actually started learning mages. And even though it sucks, like that's why Fnatic, Bwipo, he was able to play mages bot lane. So it does offer like very new like perspectives to watch the game, and I think that's always really fun as a viewer. But as a competitor, I do think they should be more communicative with the competitive organizations on how they're planning on doing it. And they've been doing a much better job of that. So hopefully, we can kind of find a more common ground in that future, so that players don't like experience burnout as much.
Yeah. So when you're out trying to figure out, what all these other teams are doing, what the enemy is doing for are you like, what sort of tools are you using? Are you just like crunching spreadsheets the whole time? And this is obviously what you can talk about, because I'm sure some things you guys would prefer to keep under wraps a little bit. But I mean, like, are you just on spreadsheets all the time? Are you into Riot's API? Are you
watching film?
Third-party tools that you do? Like, how do you actually accomplish your task? Or are your eyes just bleeding from the film room?
So there's like the pure data analytics. I think you guys did something with Seven Yunsen.
Yeah.
So that's like pure numbers, right? So it's just like all spreadsheets, all like from data API, and like you get to look at numbers. So a really common stat that a lot of people look at for laning is like gold at 15 or gold at 10, right? Or CS advantage. And then so let's say like this player has a really high CS advantage, right? I'm gonna go and want to see why, right? Were the matchups that this player was playing really, really good? Was the other player like who was he playing against, right? When he was playing this matchup, was there any jungle interference? Was there any like silent interference that made this matchup so skewed? So these are all like questions that a competitive player would ask, and it's kind of about like combining these numbers and these visual eye tests that you do in the game. It's about combining those two things to give you like a really comprehensive idea of what a player or a statistic actually means. So that's kind of what I'm trying to accomplish. And as for opponents, this is kind of what it looks like. Like if a player does a certain movement once, then it's just like, okay, that was like a natural outcome of the game. But if there's like a certain movement that a team does repeatedly with these certain trigger responses, then you're gonna know that that's like a set play that they have. So when you know that it's like a set play because you have enough data points, that's when that tool kind of becomes really, really valuable, because then you can tell your team, hey, in this map state, 90% of the time they're gonna do this kind of rotation, and then we'll be able to come up with a like rotation that can counter that before like we play our match, so that our players know like the most efficient map movement to counter what they're probably going to do. So that's kind of like that's like the really hard thing. It's like, are they doing this? Is this like a one-time occurrence, or is this something that they do every single game? And that's kind of the same thing for draft. Was this like a pick that they did once, or is it something that they do over the course of a year or multiple years? And once you can figure out that it's like a definitive correlation that they're going to do purposefully, that's when that stuff like really, really matters to the players. Because if you go ahead.
Oh, please finish your thought.
Yeah, because if you give like your players like a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet, like they're gonna be like, "What is this x-axis?" Like they're not gonna know what any of it means. But if you're able to translate those numbers into like meaningful things that they can comprehend as players, that's when, you know, the analysis actually starts to have depth. It's when it actually starts to help players. So
And so that's
yeah.
kind of the strategic, when you look at the strategic in your title, it's looking at stuff like that, and analysis of the enemy. Can you give us a generic example, just so I can visualize it, on like something that you might see a team do where you'd say, is that a planned thing, or is that just a spur of the moment?
Oh, so a perfect example would be IG. When we played against IG last year, one of the preparation was like, you know, they're really good, right? So there was
I
They're
don't
really
know,
good.
man.
but one really common movement that they had was whenever second blue buff spawned, they would have like a set play for it. So on red side, if they're red side, right,
Mhm.
and we're blue team, if we go for our blue buff, right, that means our mid and jungle are on the top side of the map, and that means their mid jungle can like easily dive pod because our mid jungle won't be there to block it. So that timing was like really, really important. So when you see that they are going to do something on that timing, whether it's like diving a lane or do something really aggressive, then you can tell like, okay, whenever this second boss spawns, this is like a play for them. So if it happens once, it's like, okay, they realize they had an advantage in game and they did something. But if they do it every single game over the course of 20 games, then it's like, okay, we really need to be careful this time. It becomes like meaningful to tell the players that, because, you know, players aren't like computers. You don't get to input something and then an output
Right.
comes, right? They have like a limited capacity of like what they can learn. So they're already like learning things like every day in scrims. They're learning about their new champions. They're learning how to play with their new teammates. So you really have to be careful, um, and you have to figure out which components are actually important to tell them, right? Because if you overload them with information, it's going to get like diluted and it's not actually going to do anything.
Yeah.
Um,
I love
Man.
thinking about like the playbook that some teams have, because, you know, just as as people who don't know a whole lot about League of Legends, we, you know, you don't tend to think about it in that way.
Yeah.
But that being said, and I don't know if this is a question you can answer or not, but like, so you obviously the training tools for that are very limited, right? Like, you want to be able to train your players to react to those sorts of situations, but so like, is something like Chrono Break, like, is that available to you guys for use
Oh,
in
no.
your training? So yeah, you guys don't even have Chrono Break. Do you
No.
just have to like set up like your academy team like plays to a certain point and then, all right, let's, like, how do you
No.
practice against the playbook?
Oh, so I mean, that's like why this is a job. Because if I had to just like watch odds and be like, this is a pattern, that would not be very, very helpful. So what I do try to layer on top of that is I see this blue buff movement, right? And then in our scrims, that blue buff movement is going to happen at least once, right? Because we play so many games every single day. So finding like examples of when we do that, when we're in similar situations, why don't we do this? Right? This is a really good movement. We're in a similar situation in scrims, and we did not do this. So let's try and do this.
Mm.
Or we're in a similar situation, and this enemy team did the exact same thing to us. So it's about like adding a layer of depth, because you don't have to actually practice that against your academy team. You're probably going to come across that occurrence in scrims, and getting the players to recognize when that happens or certain triggers in game so that leads to that, then they can start like learning that movement. So I think that's the important part of it.
Yeah, fair enough. Are you okay if we pause just a minute and take a couple questions from chat?
Yeah, of course.
One of them was about the team mood. So I think this is Evo Mike in the chat said, you know, how's the mood around with the team this time around? It seemed quiet last year, but this year it seems like, you know, maybe there's a difference with the new players. Like, how are you feeling about the team atmosphere?
So I guess we have the exact same players except for mid and AD carry. So honestly, he's already had like a really great atmosphere with what is it? Dynamic with Afro. So it's like you can see the dynamic between them still exists. So in terms of like their like translation into the team, that's been super easy. And yeah, Bang's all about like NA culture, and I think you heard in an interview that like, yeah, he wants to sound like Afro, be like Afro.
Yeah.
There's like a level of respect there, and because there's like enough of that with, you know, Afro, and you know, and then also like we have so many Koreans that there's been so many like methods for these new players to kind of integrate into our team culture. So I think the atmosphere has been pretty good so far, and hopefully we'll see that progress throughout the season.
Yeah, I thought one of the things that we liked about the Ryu staying on as a coach is being there like one more Korean there and someone else who can just kind of help everybody feel at home. But I've watched like Bang and Aframu, their like duo stream and everything. It's fun, man. I'm telling you, it's fun. It seems like the team is having fun, and that just can't be anything but good. I feel like as long as everybody's still taking it seriously. But another question was about Anda. I'm trying to find the exact question here. Etor3 asks, do you agree that Andy is an extremely underhyped player? Like, is that, I mean, what's from us talking to people? Yeah, we feel like the response we've gotten most often is that Anna's like a mid-tier NA jungler. Do you think that that's accurate? Do you think he's better than that? Like, how are you seeing him, his skill level on the team, especially after the Worlds that he had?
So Anda's really interesting. He like just works really, really hard. That's like the only way I can put it. Like, if you look at this guy's second screen, he has like a bunch of post-it notes talking about all the things he needs to improve on. And he's just very, very honest about like how good he wants to get. Because when you come across coaching, every professional player is going to tell you, I want to go to Worlds, right? And then when you see that the work behind it, like some players, it's all just like fake, right? I mean, I don't want to say it, but that's what it is. And with players like Andy, you can see like the work ethic is actually there. And he definitely wasn't performing at the level he was at Worlds during playoffs, right? He was like, there's a lot of things that you need to learn, and the amount that he learned from that period is honestly speaks more to us than how he is as a player, right? There's ability for him to continue growing, and I think that's just like the most important characteristic that we as coaching staff find important. That his ceiling isn't capped, and he's still willing to grow, and he's still willing to learn. So hopefully we can see more of that this year.
Yeah,
I'm incredibly excited for Anda's year, and I would kick myself if I didn't ask. So I think one of my most favorite plays from last season of the entire season was the opening to the IG game where Anda was walking down the river.
Okay,
like he had a prophetic vision where he knew that there
Ning was in the bush.
Yeah, Ning was in the bush, and so he just like turned around and started walking away. It was amazing, and it ended up with us getting a double, which was great. But my question for you is, was that a movement that you guys had, like, was that something he prepared for, or was that just like his spidey sense tingling?
No, the only movement, like I said, that we prepared for was the blue buff movement, and we got 8th there, so we got 8th there. So that is a movement that we did not practice enough, I guess.
We'll forgive you for its IG,
Yeah, I'm going to give Anda full credit on that one then, which I'm fully happy to do, because that was just such an awesome play. Like, watching it live, I was like, how did he know?
Yeah.
And what you're talking about, I was like, maybe you guys had seen something, but hey, I'll just, more power to Anda.
Yeah, that was all the players. Taking 0 credit for that.
We'll do one more chat question, and then we'll do a couple more of our questions to wrap up here. I want to get your take on this. This is a good one. You may have seen Jack's tweet about his evaluation of where everybody ranks, like his power rankings for Spring Split. He tweeted this. He said, based on scrims so far and personal bias, this is my current prediction for Spring Regular Split 2019. First place, C9. Second place, Clutch. Third, 100 Thieves. Fourth, Team Liquid. Fifth, Echo Fox. Sixth, FlyQuest. Seventh, TSM. 8, Golden Guardians. Optic Gaming at 9. And Counterlogic Gaming at 10. What's your take on these rankings here? Are you a hard disagree or soft disagree?
And I honestly, my honest question is that just a full troll? Like, was he just straight trolling that all the way through?
I mean, so obviously we have been scrimming teams, so like I can't say too much. But I will say that C9 boot camped in Korea before in December, and we started scrims early in January. So the fact that they got a month of practice more than us, and we're still third, I mean, it should speak speak a lot in volumes. But past that, I mean, I think every team is going to say that they're going to be first. So
and he's not going to miss a chance to put TL at 4th. So that's
yeah.
That's just classic, like Jack.
He's memeing. He's got to be memeing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's ask you about what you guys did with this scouting grounds team, right? So it was Team Mountain that went to scouting grounds and won the whole thing. And then I don't know, what was it, like a month, maybe a little bit more went by, and then 100 Thieves announces that they've signed 4 of those guys to the academy team and kept Stunt around. Kind of an unusual move, right? I don't think we've ever seen that sort of thing before. So what went into the decision of taking those 4 guys instead of just like maybe picking 1 or 2 that you had promise or whatever? It's like you actually took them as most of a whole. What was the thought process there?
Yeah, so Scouting Grounds is a pretty cool experience this year, because last year they only had 4 teams to work with the teams. Like, there's like 4 dragons. So this year, every single team was allotted to a mountain, like, or some kind of dragon. So we got to work with those players for a full week, and that's always just going to give you much more data than like any like scouting is going to do. So we got to see these players' developments. We got to see how they work well together, and then Kelsey, who's in charge of our academy program this year, she also kind of saw those same similarities in those players. So it's just like a situation that just like worked out perfectly. But yeah, like maybe some of those guys are like don't have as much experience as the other academy players in other academy rosters. But I think every single organization that was coaching that staff, us, Echo Fox, and Clutch, all those coaches, like we felt something. And it was really rare to see like these new group of guys like just work that well with each other. And like I said, like these attitude or like growth, that's like something that you don't really get to see when you're scouting someone. So being able to be with them for an entire week and kind of see that development was just a really like big positive that I think made us go in this like direction.
Yeah. Well, we're all very interested to see that, and I'm glad that the guys are starting to stream too, because it's like, I don't know, I've watched Fake God stream a couple times, and he sits there and he just like basically says everything he's thinking as he's playing. You know, he's like, I think this is gonna happen, so I'm gonna do this. And it's kind of interesting to see the thought process go into that, and I hope we get to see more from those guys on their individual streams, and then hopefully catch some academy games as well. So
yeah, we actually start this Thursday, and I'm pretty sure we have a pretty big thing ready to like stream them, so you guys should stay tuned for that. Yeah.
And that's this Thursday. I didn't realize that. So not the following, right before LCS
Thursday
starts, but this Thursday. Okay.
That is some really good news. I was looking for something to pass the next 2 weeks. There I go.
Yeah, we've been craving it a little bit. Like I was watching the Demacia Cup like for a little while. I watched Kespa and everything. So, oh man.
Are they still playing? Are you guys still scrimming the academy in the team house?
Oh yeah, it's the same Rocket Mortgage setup, and
okay,
then, like,
cool.
We scrim every once in a while.
Yeah, awesome.
Good deal.
Okay, let's before we wrap up, I get 2 more questions for you.
Yeah.
Is your philosophy as you're approaching like your strategy, is it more of like I'm gonna figure out the meta, or I'm gonna play my style? Like which of those 2 approaches do you prefer? Because we've honestly seen success on both of them.
So I think for meta, like, I think when I first started, I was all about like figure out what's meta first. We have to play that's the best way to play the game. And then I think more and more I've like worked as a coach. It's just like what is gonna give you the highest percentage chance play, and that just comes to like knowing your own players. So some players are just gonna learn champions a lot slower, but they're going to have like champions that can do well against like what's good in the meta. So you still need to know what the meta is, but just talking with your players and figuring out like what's still comfortable for them. And then there's always going to be those like gray areas where like they feel like they're comfortable, but they're actually not, and they do need to learn those things. And again, coaching is just about like making hard decisions. So right now I'm in the camp where it's just like you need to figure out what's meta, but just figure out what works for your team, whether that's like meta or not. But yeah, it's always going to be like some kind of gray area in between.
Well, okay, so I'm going to give you a pass to play both sides on that answer because, that's logical. It makes sense. You're a smart guy. That's obvious. Okay, whatever. I'm not going to allow that for this next question, okay?
Okay.
So you have to pick a side. Someone make
Okay.
it very, very simple. And you
Okay.
can even give a one-word answer if you want.
Okay.
NA solo queue.
Uh-huh.
Does it hurt or help your players?
It helps.
All right. Do you care to expound on that?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm talking your LCS players.
yeah, it helps. Like, I think NA, it's always about like, or Korea, like those players like work a lot harder, and that's always gonna be like a difference in like culture and everything. But like, when, like, for example, like Aatrox and Urgot, when that came into meta, like these players need to have that prepared before they played in scrims, because if they don't know how to play those champions and they're playing in scrims, like all of the other teammates and all of the other opponents are not gonna get good practice. Right. So just in terms of like practicing certain champions that they aren't practicing, or focusing on their own aspects of their play, solo queue is still a facet that they can do that in. Because when you're practicing the scrim environment, there are like team goals that you guys want to accomplish as a team. So you do become a little bit more conservative in the decisions you make, right? I could have all in here, but this is a risky decision, and I want to practice this other thing that we're focusing on as a team. So I'm not going to do this selfishly. But solo queue, you can do those things selfishly. You can limit tests. So um, solo queue is good for the players. It definitely helps. I mean, it's not as well set up as like Korean or European solo queue, but
Sure.
it's still something, right?
You need
And
that environment. Yeah.
When players buy into the fact that it's hurting, that's when it's just like a really terrible like negative like loop system where it's like it's not actually useless, but players believe that it's useless, so all the pros don't play. So now there's like no pro players playing solo queue, so now it's like obviously the quality's got to go down. So yeah, I just think it's like a really terrible like loop that players buy themselves into, but it just is helpful. And obviously the conditions aren't as good as the other solo queue environments, but it's something.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, anything else that you want to bring up? Do you want to give like a 30-second like hype pitch for why like 100 Thieves is going to win in 2019?
Honestly, you guys should all follow 100 Thieves. For me, I just want to be able to say like we 3x Team Liquid. Like that's like I just want to be able to say that. Like,
yes.
And when we were talking with Bang, that was like the first thing that he brought up. It's like when
Dude,
I come to
yes!
NA, I'm gonna crush double lift. So, I'm really hyped. There's gonna be a lot of storylines in NALCS. I think 100 Thieves is gonna be a really interesting team to follow. And hopefully we end up on top because we were pretty close last year. But even though it was a good year for us as an organization, like we all left Korea like very unsatisfied. Like there was a lot of what ifs, right?
Yeah.
And this year we kind of just want to feel less of that.
Man.
So yeah, please follow us in 2019. Our apparel is dope. The people that work here are great.
Please, yes.
Yeah, if you look at his back wall, it's
yes.
insane,
Pick something. Yes. Oh man, that just like injected me with like a NOS boost of pure joy. To hear you say that and that Bang was saying that. Oh man, this is gonna be just
that's been on our wish list.
Exciting split. Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure every single coach feels that. It's like when you play against double lift, it's like it's like a wall. It really is. And so with Bang, like we hope that wall doesn't exist anymore, and we want to take home a championship. Yeah.
That weekend is going to be so hype when we play them for the first time.
Is it week 1 or week 2? What we have?
2, I think, right?
It's week
2. Yeah. Cool.
Well,
we'll look forward to that. So again, thank you for joining us. Really quick, is there? I mean, are details coming on how we can tune into that academy thing, whatever's going on? Should we just watch 100 Thieves Twitter, or is there someone we can go to find that?
You should definitely just follow 100 Thieves Twitter for updates.
Okay.
I'll be talking to like some of upper management to put some more news about that. But you guys should be seeing updates pretty soon on that, and I'm excited as you guys are to see our academy team roll in, because they're playing against TSM, which has like one of our former players, Brandini, and we're also playing against C9, who are the academy world champions. So it's like a pretty tough week. But I'm really excited because we don't have the best quote unquote roster on paper, but I believe in the guys and hopefully they believe in themselves. So it's going to be really exciting.
That's awesome. So awesome. And then last thing, where can our listeners follow you? If Twitter, if you've got a Twitch, anything you want to shout out?
I don't really do like Twitch or Twitter or anything, but I do like retweet people on Twitch.
Yeah,
Sorry,
for
Twitter.
the most excellent retweets, follow Joseph
Yes.
Jang at
Yeah. That's it. Just Joseph Jang. Jungle Juice LOL.
There
Yeah.
we go. Jungle Juice LOL. Okay, cool. I can't wait to see what you're gonna retweet for us in the coming weeks. No, seriously, in all seriousness, thank you so much. This wonderful conversation. Again, it's really nice to hear like a super smart perspective from the strategic angle, and also to just get more information about what you guys do. Like, it's fascinating. Everything that you've created is really cool. It's awesome seeing you in the What's Not Given series last season, and we look forward to seeing you in the Heist this year, and making whatever appearances you can. So,
can I sneak in one final question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So some teams brought 2 coaches out for draft.
Oh yeah.
Anything to share? Like, it's probably going to remain the sole representative on stage, or what can we look forward to?
I think probably we'll have more updates on that pretty soon.
Ooh,
I'll take it.
You heard it, and I bet you he'll retweet it when it happens. So follow for that retweet.
We'll look forward to seeing you wherever you show up, for sure.
Yes. All right, and we'll look forward to juicy retweets. So again, thanks everybody for listening, and for the millionth time, thank you, Joseph, for coming in, speaking to us. We hope we can do this again at a time when you're maybe a little less pressed. And we will, like, the show is going to be starting back up for us in earnest, everybody. So definitely once the spring split starts, we'll be back to a weekly streaming schedule, and maybe, hopefully, we're working on something that we could have before then too. So you can follow us at 100 Talk Pod on Twitter, on Twitch. Stick around on Twitch, because maybe later tonight, I don't know, we haven't talked about it, but we might give you some silver play in League of Legends, and you can come laugh at us. Now we've talked about serious league stuff. You can watch some not so serious league stuff.
Exactly.
But we will do this again soon, and we thank you guys for tuning in, and cannot wait for 2019. Go on.
Happy 2019.
All right. Take care, everybody.